me talk.
That's why more and more Lagosians are tuning in.
500,000 Lagosians.
720,000.
970,000.
Over 1 million Lagosians, they know that if you give me your afternoon, I will give you hard facts.
Well done, Sandra, on all you do, going beyond the headlines and focusing on the facts.
I am Sandra Ezekwesili, and these are your hard facts.
Hello, Lagos. Good afternoon. I am Sandra Ezekwesili, and these are your hard facts. First hard fact of the day: Cyril Ramaphosa is visiting St. Petersburg and Kiev to try and bring Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table. The South African president has, of course, been very vocal about keeping communications open between the two sides and not imposing sanctions on Russia. So we're keeping our eye on that story. We'll see how it develops. Which brings me to our second hard fact. The EFCC has summoned Hadi Sirika, the ex-aviation minister. It would seem that they have questions about the Nigeria Air saga. We'll talk about that on Monday on the big weekend, I'm sure. 1 million Lagosians cannot be wrong. Thank you for tuning into today's show. I've got a great show for you, starting with the Big Three Global Edition. Let's talk about the assassination of West Darfur governor. Then let's talk about African content moderators suing Meta. And then let's talk about the starvation cult in Kenya. At 4 o'clock, we'll bring you the Hard Facts Awards. On Eyes and Nays today, let's talk about the House of Reps setting up its committees. After that, music and moments with Ifeanyi and Sam and Dexter will take the air. Expect news, business and sports at the top of the hour every hour. But let's get started with today's Big Three, shall we? I'm Sandra Ezekwesili, Lagos. These are your Hard Facts.
Global Edition on Hard Facts.
Will East Africa intervene in Sudan? Can Africa's content moderation industry bring development instead of exploitation? How did the starvation cult thrive in Kenya? This is the Big Three Global Edition. Lagos, let's talk. Every Friday at 3, we let Nigeria rest. Usually, let Nigeria rest a little. And instead, we look at the biggest international stories of the week. And joining me this Friday is our usual guest. He joins us to provide context, to think about the tough questions. Chief Andy Oboforiba, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back, Sandra.
Our first story is the ongoing conflict in Sudan between the armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. The major headline there is the kidnap and killing of Kamis Abaka, the governor of West Darfur. The situation there specifically is becoming, West Darfur specifically, is becoming something even worse, Chief. Most of the fighting there is not between the RSF and the army. Instead, we're seeing militias loyal to RSF attacking communities in West Darfur. What's causing this new dimension of violence?
So it's really a strong ethnic dimension to it, to what's going on in Darfur, West Darfur specifically. That's always been a region with a lot of ethnic tension. I mean, going back to the 2000s, when the Janjaweed were, conducting a reign of terror there. What it simply comes down to, Sandra, is you have indigenous black tribes, black ethnic groups in Darfur, and then you now have the ethnic Arab tribes who, for the last, let's say 3 decades, have been pushing to try and grab more land in Darfur. And so it's, these ethnic Arabs also tend to be pastoralist herders. And so you have this general pressure of herders trying to get access to lands that traditionally belong to farming communities. And in the 2000s, these ethnic black Sudanese tried to cede from Sudan. And to try and keep them under control, the Sudanese government empowered these herder groups, armed them, turned them into militias, These are the militias that became known as the Janjaweed. And so the Janjaweed were basically terrorizing and killing these ethnic black populations in Darfur. Hundreds of thousands were killed during those times. Now, what later happened was the Janjaweed evolved into what today has become the RSF. And the most of the RSF soldiers today are recruited from the old Janjaweed or trained by the old Janjaweed. They found themselves in power. Now they've fallen out of favor with the army, but those ethnic Arab militias in Darfur that still have very strong ties to the RSF have now been emboldened, and so they are restarting that land grab agenda and using this war now as an excuse to try and crush those ethnic black Sudanese in Darfur.
And the governor of West Darfur accused the RSF of committing genocide in his state. And shortly after that, he was abducted and assassinated. The army is accusing the RSF, but the RSF is also accusing the army. What are the neutral observers saying?
Well, it's an interesting one, Sandra. I think when they say that a witch cries in the night and a child dies in the morning, but it's really interesting that he comes out and calls the RSF by their name and says they're committing genocide in his and enabling genocide in his state, and he is very publicly kidnapped by armed men and then very publicly assassinated, and his body left outside. I mean, most people are blaming or pointing their fingers at the RSF. At the same time, though, it should be pointed out that in that same press conference where he accused the RSF, he also accused the Sudanese army of letting the RSF do it. He accused them of not coming out of their barracks to protect his people while these attacks were going on, turning a blind eye. Almost like, let it happen because, well, at the end of the day, we also don't like you either. So if these other people are killing you, well, all right. So is there a possibility that, yes, the Sudanese army is also behind it? They took exception to him saying that? I guess. Is there a possibility that it's a false flag operation from them to make their enemy look bad? I guess. But where would the money be? The smart money would be probably the RSF.
And we're getting reports that these militias are stopping civilians from leaving their homes to get food or water, and so people are maybe being forced to starve to death in their homes. Is this simply genocide by indirect means, and a way to get rid of an ethnic population, or is this regular war strategy, warfare, etc., etc.?
Yeah, that's the thing. This is the kind of thing that we see. This is pure genocide. When you try and stop people from getting access to food and water. I mean, the rules of warfare are very clear that civilian populations should not be denied access to food. It should not be done. If it's done inadvertently, then you must, once somebody is stepping in to try and rectify that situation, you must allow them, as a belligerent, allow them to provide food, water, and medical care to civilians if the cutoff was inadvertent. And then definitely you shouldn't intentionally deny them food and all of that. Starving people intentionally is not, oh, that's war. No, that's not war. And it's not like recently, like even long before Nigeria was independent, like as far back as the world wars, as a human race, we decided that starvation was not a legitimate means of war. Starvation was not a legitimate weapon of warfare. So any war you hear anybody talk about in the 20th century or 21st century, and somebody starved the other side and they said it's just war. No, it wasn't just war. It was a war crime. It was genocide.
All right, then. Lagos, of course, you can join the conversation 0700-993-993, 01465-7190. Since these ethnic Arab militias doing the ethnic cleansing are more loyal to the RSF, why isn't the army doing more to step into the community in West Darfur as the enemy of their enemy?
That's the $1,000,000 question, Sandra. Like, why? Like, if you don't condone what the RSF is doing, why aren't you stepping in to stop it? Why aren't you stepping in to make sure that these people have access to medical care, to food, to water, to life? the only explanation, the only two possible explanation is either the Sudanese military is not capable of stopping the RSF in West Darfur, or the Sudanese armed forces are okay with what the RSF is doing there. Now, they being okay with it could be for multiple reasons. It could be that they feel like, okay, if the RSF and its militias are occupied in Darfur, conducting genocide, then they won't be able to commit all their resources to other parts of Sudan. So that allows us to beat them there, which is very cynical, very like horrible way of thinking about things. Like, oh, well, genocide is a nice distraction so I can beat you. Or it could be that they're looking at it and they're saying, well, we don't like these Darfuris either. If somebody's going to kill them, that's fine by us. At least nobody will say we're the ones that killed them, but it's okay by us. So either way, there is no acceptable answer for the Sudanese army standing back and letting this happen.
Now, we've seen both the US and Saudi Arabia negotiating ceasefire agreements. Why haven't those worked?
Like, it's funny, like this, all these ceasefire agreements, what basically has happened after each one is the first two sides agree to the ceasefire. Let's say the ceasefire is supposed to end today by 4 p.m. as we end Big Three Global. By 3:55, we're already seeing their armored cars moving into position to go and start fighting. So basically, both sides are just seeing these ceasefires as a chance to sit down, recharge battery, rearm, do a few things, and get ready to fight again. There hasn't been any serious intention to end the conflict from the belligerents themselves.
And of course, you're seeing that East African governments put together a delegation to mediate between the two sides, but the Sudanese government has rejected Kenya's President William Ruto as the delegation chairman. What's happening there?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So yes, IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority for Development, that's like is the new ECOWAS in East Africa, basically. So they've created this team. It's made up of 4 countries. I think it's Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti, and one more, which is South Sudan. These four countries are supposed to send a delegation to Sudan to make peace. And Kenya's President William Ruto, is supposed to be the head of the delegation. But the Sudanese army, the armed forces, are saying no. They say that Ruto is a supporter of the RSF. They are insisting that the RSF currently has camps in Kenya. And so because of that, they don't trust any committee that has Ruto as the head. Instead, what they want is for Salva Kiir, the president of South Sudan, the one that was seen on tape a few months ago, possibly like urinating in public because he forgotten where he was. Yes, they want him to be the head of the delegation. But there isn't enough confidence in the rest of the East African community in Salva Kiir as a lead negotiator here. So there is some sort of like misalignment that needs to be solved before the East Africans can come in. But I would just want to point out, like I was overhearing you doing your first hard fact about Ramaphosa going to Kenya and going to Europe. There's been a lot of insult and pushback about Ramaphosa and Africans going to go and make peace in Europe. And people are saying, what about Sudan? Well, I'm just pointing out that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like the African community is doing both. They are both trying to make peace in Sudan and going to make peace in Russia. Now, on the other hand, we always say Africans never want to take leadership. So I think sometimes we have to ask ourselves, like, what do we really want? Do we want Africans inserting themselves on the world stage? Or do we want us to, like, after all, like America or any of these other countries, they don't have their houses in order before they go out to come and boss us around and tell us what to do. So maybe it's time that we too are hypocritical about these things. I don't know. But,
yeah. Okay, I have one final question and then I'll come to Lagos. Given the humanitarian disaster on our hands, should other countries intervene more directly? Do you think that they will intervene more directly?
So there's always a good question, because right now what everybody is fixated on is humanitarian intervention. Everybody's saying we want to create corridor. Like in fact, the African Union, what they're saying is let's try and create a corridor. IGAD too says as a first step, let's create a humanitarian corridor so that we can get aid in to these places that are cut off and everything like that. But now, normal circumstances, that would be a reasonable way to approach these things. We know that you two sides, you won't end your war today. We're still negotiating with you to end the war. But until then, please, let's come in and bring aid, right? That's a normal thing people say. However, in this case, Sandra, it's clear that at least one of the sides, if not both sides, is using hunger as a weapon of war. So this humanitarian crisis is not just a side effect of this conflict. It is a feature of the conflict. They are using it on purpose to starve minority populations. So if we keep waiting and saying, oh, please allow us to do humanitarian, the answer will always be no or later. How did they come tomorrow? We may be getting to the point where Africans will need to put boots on the ground there. But there's a problem with that. Will the African Union have the money to fund a peacekeeping or peace enforcement operation in Sudan? That's a big question. By the way, the African Union only funds 37% of its own budget. The rest of the money for the budget comes from foreign aid, 63%. So if African boots want to go on the ground, China and America may have to say yes to it.
Lagos, join the conversation 0700-993-993-993. Today we are in Sudan because Fridays we let Nigeria rest a bit and we take a look at the biggest stories from other parts of the world. And one of our stories is out of Sudan. This war in Sudan continuing to rage. We've got Chief Andy Oboforibo on the show with us, answering the tough questions, providing context for these stories. 01465 7190 0700-993-993-993. WhatsApp is 080-959-75805. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. What's your name, sir?
Ezigbo mmadụ onye nwa Gozie.
Gozikwagi. What's your name, sir?
This is Igwe Victor, the merchant man.
Igwe Victor, welcome. Talk to me.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. Chief. I enjoy his analysis.
Okay.
Sandra, in a very quick submission, I think the network is acting somehow funny.
Okay.
You just make a very succinct submission.
Okay.
If there is one union I've known to be very, very useless, it is African Union.
Okay.
They have not done anything to promote the sovereignty, security of life across board. When you talk of the regional outfit that's supposed to assure security and intervention when it is necessary. Okay. I don't think African Union will have much to do until those people that are on the brink of extermination would have been annihilated. Okay. African Union is a dog that barks without teeth to bite. So I pray if there are other countries like South Africa who has actually gone to Russia, to Ukraine, to intercede and intervene on behalf of the Ukrainian people. By tomorrow, they will be going to Russia to meet with Vladimir Putin. I think Egypt and South Africa should step up in order to intervene so that those minority people should not suffer what the Igbo suffered during the Civil War, because they use this means to depopulate people they really want to annihilate. Just like she said, it is not a legitimate means of war. But you know, the crudity of black man, they always try to invoke things that are not popular in order to subdue their opponents.
All right, thank you very much for calling. Francis is in VI. Hi, Francis.
Yeah, President Sandra, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Talk to me.
Yes, I'm listening carefully to your guest. One question I want to ask you is this. In all that is happening in African continent, where is the position of Nigeria?
Where's the position of Nigeria?
Yes, because we are gradually losing it. I remember those days in the case of Darfur region, how Nigeria involved fully the armed forces, even the police, they went there and they achieved great success. But right now, in all the abnormality that's happening in Africa, Nigeria is nowhere to be found. Our voice is gone. What can be done to restore the position of Nigeria in Africa continent? Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for calling. Okay. Chief, I'm going to let you share your thoughts on those last two calls, but you will share those thoughts after we come back from this break because we've got a break coming up. Malik, you'll have to give us a call back because we have a break coming up. If you just tuned in Lagos, this is Hard Facts on 99.3 Nigeria Info. Every Friday from 3 to 4, we bring you 3 of the biggest international stories of the week. And this week, we started in Sudan, where there's ongoing conflict there between the armed forces and the rapid support forces. And the major headline from this week was the kidnapping and killing of Kamis Abaka, the governor of West Darfur. The situation there quite dire, becoming something that is even worse. You have civilians being starved, being denied access to food and water. You have peace talks failing. You have groups getting formed to go and mediate between the warring sides, and these groups essentially being ignored. You have the U.S. and Saudi Arabia negotiating ceasefire agreements. It's all falling through. And our guest on the show, trying to help us answer the questions of why. Why is this happening? Why is this going on? Why does there seem to be almost a target, really, in the Western Darfur region of Sudan. And when we come back, we'll take those questions from Igwe. We'll talk about some of the points Igwe Victor raised, and then, of course, address the questions from Francis in Victoria Island. Also, still to come, African content moderators are suing Meta. Why are they doing this? Find out after the break. I'm Sandra Ezekwesili.
We all need those words to boost our faith, to give us hope and reasons to continue. Words that can change our lives and get us into action. Sunday Elevation on 99.3 Nigeria Info. The Sunday experience you need to kickstart your week on a high note.
2023 has been tough so far. Sakba everywhere. But wait, do you know you can turn things around with only 100 naira? Yes, with only 100 naira on oneplay.ng. You can win from 20,000 naira up to 1 million naira every single night. People are already winning, and it's so easy. Here's how to play. Simply dial *347*880# with only 100 naira and follow the prompt. Or you can go to oneplay.ng to win up to 20,000 naira and more. Listen or watch the live draws on Wazubia FM with Expensive from 8 p.m. on Cool FM with Kimmy Smalls from 9 p.m. and on Nigeria Info with Ada Blessing from 10 p.m. to know if you're a winner. You can play as many times as you want to increase your chances of winning. Draws are happening every night, so don't miss it. Let's play. OnePlay is a registered trademark of Lasho Trading Services Limited, licensed and regulated by the Lagos State Lotteries and Gaming Commission. Terms and conditions apply.
Attention all. Let's gather at the public square, where the significant political procedures are talked about.
If you want local government autonomy, administrative and financial, who you vote in your House of Assembly or governor matters.
Offering the unique perspective and valuable insights on the topics that shape our country.
If citizens break the deadlock of governors capturing State House of Assembly with sponsored candidates, there needs to be democracy at the state level.
Engaging in lively, tailored discussions, no matter what your political views may be.
Nobody's religion is going to improve the living standard of citizens, that's for sure.
Tune in to the show that keeps you in the know. Public Square with Rotimi Sakori. Back on air from July 7th, Fridays, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
99.3 Nigeria Info.
Your number one station for talk. Let's talk. Let's talk.
Sandra Ezekwesili, and this is the big three on Hard Facts, big three global edition that is on Hard Facts. And I've got my guest on the show with me, still Chief Andy Oboforbo, providing answers to some of our questions about, well, for instance, what's going on in Sudan. Now, the last caller, Francis from Victoria Island, was asking, where is Nigeria in this conversation? Chief, where are we?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, that's it. Well, I wouldn't even say it's a good question anymore. We all know where Nigeria is. Nigeria has, over the last, say, 20 years, just regressed further and further backwards in terms of our say on the African stage. Even on the West African stage, we are no longer a very vocal leader. I think that's simply because we kind of have a lot of problems at home. I mean, we have, out of control inflation, out of control unemployment, a currency crisis, border. I mean, how do you lead the rest of Africa when you're closing your border against the rest of Africa? So, I think that's the answer.
Okay, that's the answer, he says. All right then. Let's come to let's come to our second story on the show. The African, well, not the African, but African content moderators are suing Meta, the parent company of Facebook. The lawsuit is from 184 content moderators who worked at a content moderation center in Kenya. They're accusing Meta and its subcontractor of failing to provide mental health support and violating their employment agreements. I'm glad that you are on the show because you're also in the tech ecosystem, so you can explain this one. What's content moderation? How do these content moderation centers work?
Yeah, great. So, I think we've all had the experience, maybe on Facebook, you're on Twitter, or on Instagram, and you see something that's offensive, something that violates the rules. It could be maybe a video of violence, or maybe some hate speech, a threat against someone, a threat to murder people of a particular ethnic group. And you see something like that, and there's a little button that tells you report. And you can report that post, and it asks you the reasons why you're reporting the post. So when you report the post, then maybe a couple of days later, you get a message in your inbox from the platform saying, we have looked into this and we have taken down the post, or we've looked into it, we suspended the user, or we've looked into it and we've decided that there's no need to take any action. So what happened between you pressing that button and you getting that message a few days later? What happens is that message, that your report is taken somewhere. And these days, oftentimes, that somewhere is an office building somewhere in Africa. All of these companies, all of these platforms have gotten into contracts with these companies called content moderation centers that have just a whole bunch of people sitting down. And what they do all day is they're sitting in front of a computer and they're seeing our reports. We report content, they look at it, they decide if our report makes sense or not. So these people are just watching the worst and of the worst of content online daily for a living to confirm my report that, yes, this was bad content and shouldn't have been there. So that's one set of content moderation. There's another type, which is really not only content moderation per se, but it's the same model. And that's with AI. So now all of us are like, we are all in love with ChatGPT. We are all in love with DAL-E. Oh, wow, look at how it can create an image from scratch. Look at how it can create, sentences from scratch. How did this AI learn to do that? The AI learned to recognize images and speech by being shown those images and speech with a label. So the only way an AI learns that this is a picture of a cat is someone telling the AI, showing the AI 1,000 pictures of a cat and labeling it. And that labeling is being done in an office somewhere in Africa. You have people who sit down in front of a computer all day, they see an object, and you ask them, what's the object? And then they type a cat. That is now sent to an AI, and this is how we are teaching AI how to identify cats, basically. So that's what's happening at these content centers.
Moderation centers. And these employees are suing over their mental health. What's the context there? You touched on it briefly, but go into a bit more detail there.
Yeah, so basically these particular people were, like I said, they're working for, like you said, rather, they were working for Meta, which is Facebook. And so they are moderating content on Facebook. And they say that they've been bombarded with graphic pictures, graphic videos, like upsetting hate speech, all kinds of stuff on a daily basis. Now, they're not complaining about that. They understood that that was part of the job. But part of the job was also the promise that they would be getting access to the best like mental health care because of the nature of that job. And that's the standard in the rest of the world, by the way. When you're doing this sort of jobs like content moderation in Europe or in America, like they have therapists on standby. It's part, you don't pay for that therapist. It comes with the job. And you have a maybe weekly or fortnightly or whatever it is, but you have regularly scheduled therapist appointments to make sure that you're okay. Now, these people are saying that that part was not being done. In fact, many times it was not being done at all, but sometimes it was just being done periodically. Then they are also claiming that the pay, the salaries that they agreed to were not being paid as at when they were not being given the full benefits that they were giving. And I mean, who wants to deal with that when you're dealing with a very stressful job where you're watching the worst humanity has to offer all day, every day?
Right. It's something that isn't looked at a lot. It's something that it isn't considered often. The toll that being the first person to be exposed to contents like that, and then having to sift through that content and allow for what the general public will consume, the toll that it takes on your mental health. I can relate because this is what I have to do every day for my work. We all know, however, that in many African countries, employment laws are weak. And even the ones with good laws that protect employer and employees have poor enforcement. But Kenya is usually seen as very different. So this is a bit surprising to me. How come we're seeing such a serious case coming out of Kenya?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's actually a source of surprise for many people because Kenya has better labor laws and a better culture of labor than other sub-Saharan African countries, or most others, also all. So that was surprising. And I honestly don't have the answer for that. But what I have seen being discussed in a lot of forums is how powerful Meta, Facebook, has become in Kenya, and and how powerful they are becoming in a lot of African countries because look, we're paying this much in taxes, we're bringing these many jobs, especially places where they have like offices, like serious, not like in Nigeria where they're not really here. And so what they are doing there, they're saying, we're doing all of this for you, so we expect a lot of like concessions, or there's a lot of influence that is pushed in these situations, making governments turn a blind eye to things that they normally wouldn't turn a blind eye to. And that's, so that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this.
And clearly these companies are bringing these specific jobs here because, labor is cheap. You have those who see all of this as exploitation, but you have others who point to places like China and Vietnam, places like that also have, or that also started as cheap labor providers, but leveraged on that to climb up the value chain and industrialize. In your own opinion, which of these two situations is Africa in?
I should charge you for this answer because I could write this as an article somewhere. But in my opinion, my opinion is there's a bit of truth in both. It depends on how we go. But it's harder in this. It's harder with the knowledge economy in this particular way than it is, or let me say it's harder with software tech of this sort than it was with, say, manufacturing. Because with manufacturing, right, you've built the power plant, you've built the factory, you brought the machines, people are there, and they are learning how to work the machines. There's a lot of knowledge transfer. That know-how transfer comes in manufacturing. But if you think about this, what know-how transfer has come here? Sitting down in content moderation centers, what have those people learned? They've not really learned anything. They already knew how to distinguish graphic violence from non-violence. But what's happening is the real information, the real know-how, extra knowledge is actually being exported back to the West. So the AI is the one that did not know how to identify a cat. We've now used 200,000 Africans sitting in front of computers to teach the AI how to identify a cat. Now we now have an AI in Europe or in America that knows how to identify a cat, and that's going to be monetized for the owners of that AI in Europe or in America, while Africa still doesn't have any AIs that can recognize a cat. It's the same thing. Like now, for example, Facebook is also using AI to moderate content. Now that AI is learning from these African content moderators. So eventually they are not going to be needed anymore because Facebook, Twitter, and everybody else will have trained AI that can do this. So the question becomes, what would have been gained by the end? Now, the only way you can gain something from this is if you have a government that's alive to this issue. And the government is saying, okay, yes, we have no problem with you using our cheap labor, the knowledge in the heads of our people to train your AI and to train your moderation, your content moderation tools. But in exchange, there has to be either a share of the profits that comes from that added knowledge, that value add, or there has to be a share of the know-how. Give us the AI technology. Let us share in those models. There has to be some sort of agreement like that on ground. Otherwise, at the end of the exploitation, it will just be over and they'll move on. But that's really from a government policies side. All the people can do, the actual workers, is just band together, and they're doing it right now. As of like last month into this month, content moderators in Africa are now unionizing, forming unions in various countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, etc. The hope is that if they unionize, then they can speak with one voice to the big tech platforms and get a better deal. But that's a personal deal, not a technology-wide deal.
All right, Lagos, join the conversation 0700-993-993-993. We've gone to Sudan, we've gone to Kenya. We are going to stay in Kenya a little bit because something horrific is happening there. But let's talk about this second story and the first as well. Our first story, the ongoing conflict in Sudan. We told you about what's going on in West Darfur. Now we've gone to Kenya to tell you about content moderators there. Call us on 0700-993-993-993 to share your thoughts. 01465-7190. We've got WhatsApp messages. So here is from Genesis in Bariga. Genesis says, Sandra, you cannot give what you don't have. What is happening in Sudan could have been happening in all African countries if not for the grace of God. These shameless leaders are too engaged in stealing, impoverishing their people, holding on to power, rather than taking care of black Sudanese. It's like there's something wrong with us because everybody hates us, but we also still hate ourselves as black people. All right, Genesis, thanks for your message. We've got this one here. You see, it's the same pattern happening in Nigeria with bandits and herdsmen going about killing people, occupying their lands. Remember then in 2021, Buhari announced his resolve to revive cattle routes and grazing areas gazetted during the First Republic in 1963. It took Abubakar to dig up the 1963 Gazette, which established grazing routes across the country. And you know some southern governors disapproved of this move. Benue is first on the list of states that banned open grazing in Nigeria, and they're paying with blood, also losing their lands and farms to criminals and bandits. We've got whatever evil you tolerate is what you encourage. With this little comment of fact, I don't think anyone needs me to show them where the problem is coming from and from whom. So, okay, you didn't leave your name, but thank you very much for your message on WhatsApp. All right, we've got 9 minutes left, so let's quickly dive into our final story. This final story, Lagos, is an absolute horror from Kenya. At least 302 members of a cult-like church are dead after apparently starving themselves. Paul Mackenzie, the leader of the Good News International Church, told his followers that they needed to starve themselves and their children in April because Jesus was coming to end the world. And now 302 members at least are dead. He's now in custody and is on trial. The man himself, by the way, did not starve himself, Chief. The man himself didn't starve himself, and yet at least 302 of his followers are now dead, with at least 600 more still missing in the forest where they were staying and starving and waiting for Jesus. How can someone get that much power over people, Chief?
Sandra, it's a shocking thing, and it's something we see all the time. Political power, political leadership, religious leadership, cultural leadership, traditional leadership, like I have as a chief. It comes with a lot of power over people's minds. And if you have systems in place that double down on that power, reinforce it, and encourage people not to question, then you oftentimes end up in these situations where the person who has that power like just uses it in the most reckless ways possible. And of course there's nothing wrong with us being religious as a people, but I think in everything we do, I think human beings have to just learn to like try the open eyes small now. Who they cry still they see road. But sometimes in many ways we just give ourselves over completely to like people, to other people. As leader, anything you say is true. And then you have so many people who are just so ready as sociopaths, equipped to exploit it, increase it, maximize that, and use it to whatever end. So this is just one of these other situations like that, and it's heart wrenching.
And it actually is something that happens quite a bit. So many of
Yes.
these cults end in a mass suicide or an attempted mass suicide. I remember there was Jim Jones and the Guyana tragedy. There was the Heaven's Gate cult in the 90s. There was Reverend King here in Lagos as well. You had such a cult in Uganda as well. What usually pushed the cult leaders to make their followers kill themselves? How do they get to that point?
It's interesting. What you found is most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, there's a cover up. Most of the time, the cult leader has done some terrible atrocity or multiple such atrocities. And it has gotten to the point where they know that if this matter comes out, like it's going to be horrible for them. But there's now no longer any way to stop the matter from coming out. And so what they simply do is, I don't want to ever lose my power over these people. Let them die. Well, let's die. Or let me die and let all of you come and die with me. Or whatever it is. And most of the time, by the time after the deaths, you now look into it, there was some scandal. It's usually like a sex scandal, because if you think about it, it tracks that a person who would be so like megalomaniacal and sociopathic to like cut people off from their families, gather them into a commune and treat me like a god, that person is also exploiting those people, oftentimes sexually, also almost always financially. So there's always fraud or rape, molestation, all these kinds of like horrible atrocities. And the only way out, so to speak, is where make we all die. And we see that over and over. This thing I just described, Jim Jones that you mentioned, that's what was happening. In fact, that's why Jim Jones packed his people out of America and went to Guyana in the first place, because the heat was getting too much from law enforcement. So come, let's go and stay here where, let's go and stay somewhere in the third world where people won't like look at us too much. But even then, even the third world people were like, no, there's something weird about these people. And when he felt the heat was too much on him, he killed himself and made sure all his people joined him. Same thing with Heaven's Gate. Same thing with that cult in Uganda. I think that one was there was robbery, and so it's always that thing. There's always a cover up.
Always a cover up, he says. Lagos, how have you been following this story out of Kenya with the church, the church leader that forced his congregation to starve? 302 dead at least, over 600 people who are currently trying to recover. 0700-993-993-993, 01465-7190, 0700-993-993-993, 01465-7190. We've got WhatsApp as well. WhatsApp is 080-959 75805. 99.3. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, good evening. Good afternoon.
What's your name, sir?
My name is Etubi. I'm calling from Yaba.
Talk to me, Etubi.
All right. Yeah, you see, there's a saying that if you stay long in a barber shop, you had your hair cut. Information is very powerful. Inferior or real is very powerful. It didn't start in a day. For the pastor or the so-called pastor, whoever he is, I don't want to call him a pastor. We should look for names to call these people, right?
Right.
For him to have gotten to this level, he must have taken his time, and the people too must have taken their time to listen to what he has been telling them. All right. Look, knowledge. Everybody can be either inflicted with knowledge or be transformed with knowledge. For instance, we think how dumb could these people be to have come to this level of starving themselves. Knowledge is very powerful, okay? Look at the time MMM came up in Nigeria.
Right.
You would imagine, I have a lot of people who went to school. I mean, most of the people who even got involved in that thing there were people who were educated, right?
Right.
But if graduates, people who had gone for service and even have a better job. But would you imagine somebody like Otedola or Dangote investing in MMM?
No.
Why? Because they have this knowledge that investment doesn't just come from anything. Investment is not abstract. I don't know how to say it now.
Yeah.
Something has to go before something will come back.
Yes.
You know, as basic as this knowledge is, majority of Nigerians fell into it, even responsible men, people who are well known. I mean, because they lack knowledge in that aspect. And we still have this drain of knowledge in different aspects of life. We need to look Africa, and that will make me to relate it to what's happening in same Kenya as the content
moderators
with Meta.
Yeah.
Now we look down on ourselves, right, as Africans.
Right.
I'll use the word upgrade because we are talking about tech now. There is a need for the government, just as our guest has said earlier, to be involved in these processes. You can't just have people come here and, give us a job on their own terms without following up as a government. If there are existing acts or laws regarding foreigners coming to invest here, either in our intellect or in our natural resources, there should be a need for a review or an upgrade. Yeah, as I said earlier, an upgrade of those laws, of those acts.
Right.
Because things are changing. Look, change is constant.
Right.
Whether we like it or not, things will change.
Right.
The earth is changing. I mean, when we talk of the global warming, everything is changing.
Right.
Life will change.
Right.
Every atmospheres will change. Weather conditions are changing. So will everything change. You can't sit back with the previous agreement you had with these people without reviewing it and the government. And those guys that are in charge, the employees now that are in this country, they also need to not just pay attention to the contract they signed. They also need to pay attention to the processes. They need to have a process. Okay, the first 3 months, we agree to this, right? All right, what if it fails? They should ask questions like, what if? So they can put in some processes, some working processes like, okay, what if this doesn't come up? This is what's going to happen. They should include that in their contracts. And I believe once these people see us being strict with getting us to do work for them like this, they will know we know what we are doing, and the way we see ourselves.
They'll know what we know what we're doing, and of course, that respect will be reciprocated. Thank you so much for calling. I think you ran out of airtime there. All right, we've got Comrade Koboko and Malik on the line at the same time. I don't know how that happened. However, we have a break coming up, so let's take that break. We'll be right back. Lagos, don't go away.
More news and information coming up. We'll be back in a moment.
Sincerely, I don't want to wait till I graduate from this school before I think of what to do with my life.
Exactly. I am going to seriously work on my music skills. Let me use my talent well, I beg.
I would like to be a radio presenter, but I don't know how to go about it.
But why is Timmy so quiet today?
Sorry, ladies. I'm taking this course on how to become a professional scriptwriter. You too can also learn how to become a radio presenter on Wazobia Academy.
Wazobia Academy?
Yes, Wazobia Academy provides accessible and affordable online training in filmmaking, music business, fashion, radio hosting, and lots more. You also stand a chance to be selected for internship in leading production companies, radio stations, music, and fashion studios for hands-on experience. It's easy. Simply log on to www.wazobiaacademy.com or call 0908-826-5038 for more details.
Wazobia Academy. Learn and lead.
The round table is back.
I recall that the former Minister for Interior, Abdurrahman Dambazao, said that people go in as dogs and come out as lions.
I don't think the Nigerian government actually took the time to look at it from a holistic perspective.
And it's just really painful because it seems as though that, with every new government, we tend to miss the previous government.
It's just like you put human beings to live as pigs inside a place. How do you correct such? I don't even know who gave them the idea of changing the name.
The round table. This June 28th, 10 a.m. to 12 noon, 29th, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. and 30th, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Be part of the table on 99.3 Lagos, 92.3 Port Harcourt, and 95.1 Abuja. Let's talk.
I would just say that we're good in Nigeria.
99.3 Nigeria Info, your number one station for talk. Let's talk.
Chief Andy Oboforba, thank you so much for joining us on the Big Three Global Edition today.
Thank you, Sandra. Congratulations, Hilda Bassi.
Yes, indeed. Incidentally, she's one of our stories on today's Hard Facts Awards. Lagos, let me take a look at the messages you have shared with us on WhatsApp now. This message says, Sandra, honestly, I wonder why some people easily fall for such. Someone will tell you to wear bomb, then go and kill yourself and you go to heaven because of virgins waiting for you. Then he doesn't want to die too, so as to make heaven and enjoy those virgins. Someone will tell you to fast to death so as to make heaven, and he will not first show the example of fasting to death first. Honestly, I don't know what to say. People Desha. Richard from Lagos with that message. Blessing says, Sandra, oh no, actually that's Chooks from Ikeja who says, Sandra, how are we sure that such atrocities like what happened in Kenya are not taking place here in Nigeria because of the way some of these are called themselves men, women of God, brainwash their innocent followers? So I am urging Nigerians to shine their minds as well, not only their eyes. All right, thank you very much for that message. Well, we had our own here in Nigeria now. For Mashibi, there was Reverend King, who set his congregation ablaze, right?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so I mean, he just recently went to jail and he still has followers all over the place. We've got Jeff Fazzi who says, thank you for the great work you're doing. I think this Kenya cult-like church issue is mostly a case of hypnotizing and brainwashing of the members, because all those number of members cannot just be dumb to sheepishly follow a man to kill themselves. All right. We've got Bahome who says, I think it's more of a mental disorder of the cult leader than scandals leading to this. Religion is the opium of the masses. It works like opium. What do you expect the poor to do? All right, Bahome, thanks for your message. Genesis says, those people are not following Jesus. They're following a man. That man has unimaginable power of persuasion. Please, they should send him to Nigeria to hold a seminar for our... Hold a seminar for our politicians. Maybe he'll be able to get them to starve for a year or get them to work without salary. All right. Thank you for your message. That's all the time we have. Ufoma is here to bring you business news, and then let's have some fun after the business news on Hard Facts Awards. I've got best story of the week. I've got worst story of the week. I've got Nawa story of the week. Yes, you know the stories that will be on the Nawa story of the week for this week. So let's get ready to have a bit of fun right here on your number number one station for talk. I am Sandra Ezekwesili, Lagos. Don't go away.
We feed you with the right information.
And I want to assume that you would run because I want to give the listeners context for the conversation.
In 2019, you were running mate to Atiku Abubakar. What did you learn then that you will not repeat this time?
Yes, when is the president coming out to address us?
There's a few things. One, I have a burn passion for young people.
The fact that you have elected a man does not mean then you begin to order him around. The president will do whatever is good for the country at any given time.
Mr. Adeshino, isn't the president responsible to the people?
What should the next president do to root out stakeholders who are complicit?
You fire those. Those that need to be fired are fired.
It's looking like a brand new Chelsea, attacking with so much fluidity. And what can you say about that, Martin? I know you follow Chelsea quite closely.
I live close to the Chelsea training ground. That's